Good morning, party people, and welcome back. The first live stream in a long time. I think it's been 2 months probably since the last time that I live streamed, because as a bunch of you know, I have moved to Iceland. This is a little bit of a different scenery than I usually see. It's a different home office than you would usually see. Way lower in terms of the quality. We're in a rental home, not stream quality. Stream quality should be about the same. But we're in a rental house in the outskirts of Iceland, out in the countryside. And so I didn't bring my full studio setup. I didn't bring my Mac Pro, all that kind of thing, my standing desk and all that. We went and bought a standing desk at a furniture store. It's supposed to be like a bar, I think, basically. And I took over one of the spare bedrooms. Santi says, great setup and view. Thanks, Steve, for the welcome to Europe. Oh, is it not showing? I don't know why it's not showing. Oh, no, it is showing the chats. Yeah, it's a nice, fun, different thing, of course. And the way that we set up when we moved to Iceland, we're here for like 6 months on the teleworker visa. We would totally stay longer if they would let us stay out here. But I just brought a bunch of portable gear and a Pelican case so that I can travel around the country and we can do streaming from different places, which is easier here because in Iceland, the gig Ethernet is spread all over the place. Like you can get gig fiber in most of the homes out there. Kenneth says, congratulations on the move. Thank you. We're really excited. We'd been planning it for a really long time. We were here a year ago in Iceland, not in this house, but just in Iceland in general, when the quarantines hit. And we were forced to come back early when the U.S. State Department said, everyone get back to the United States, or else you may not be able to get back in. And we were on the fence for it for a really long time. We thought maybe we would just stay in Iceland. And I'm looking back, I'll always wish that I would have, just to see what that adventure would have been like. But from the moment that we got back in the States, we started planning our return visit here. And we're like, how can we be here for longer this time? And really see the whole countryside, all kinds of sights and things like that. So because we planned it out, it is my first public stream from Iceland. It's not my first training class. I actually did like 2-3 weeks of training classes earlier, and I'll talk about that. So from the moment that we started planning it out, we said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Iceland for an extended vacation, like 3 to 6 months. And I was going to continue teaching training classes so I could continue to sell stuff for like the live class season pass. Oh, Simon, I'll talk about that in a second. So I could continue selling the live class season pass and students could continue working, but I wasn't going to take on any new clients. And I was only going to work 2 to 3 weeks at a time and then be off for 2 to 3 weeks. Well, we planned this out long in advance. So this started in my calendar in January, work for 2 to 3 weeks, be off for 2 to 3 weeks, work for 2 to 3 weeks, be off for 2 to 3 weeks. Because we didn't know when our Iceland visa was going to get accepted, when we were going to get allowed to come into the country, because you have to get the visa before you can come in now because of the whole COVID-19 thing. So, hey, Renegade, good long time no see. So we came in, we got the alert from Iceland in like early January. Hey, your teleworker visa has been approved. And it happened to be right in the middle of a training class sprint, so that worked perfectly. We just packed up everything. We hired movers and just hopped on a plane and came over here, did the whole quarantine for a while. And then immediately after that, after quarantine, I had to jump right in and do training classes again. So we drove up to this rental house that we'd had all set up. Did like 3 weeks straight of training classes, and after 3 weeks straight of training classes in this exact studio, the same streaming setup, just to my live class season pass students. After that 3 weeks, I was like, I'm done for a while. We're gonna go run around the country. So we've driven all over the place. I sit in the hot tub a whole lot. But I haven't done any live streaming because I wanted to just totally unplug for a while and relax. So now we're finally getting back into the rhythm where I can do live streaming, where I can kind of alternate back and forth between the work for 2 to 3 weeks, goof off for 2 to 3 weeks. The live classes will be all over the place, or the streaming will be all over the place in terms of time, which ties into what Sukhvir says. Finally streaming at hours where I don't have to get up at 4 a.m. to watch. I know, right? Like I was trying to figure out how the calendar would work for me, because I only want to stream when my wife is otherwise preoccupied, like if my wife is in bed. So like now, it is 7:50 a.m. Iceland time. My wife usually stays in bed or sleeps until somewhere between 9 and 10. Like somewhere between 9 and 10 a.m. she'll wake up. And we're both relearning new sleep schedules here in Iceland. She used to get up way earlier over in the States. She would get up like 8 a.m. So I was like trying to figure out where am I going to fit streaming into here, because I adore doing it. I have so much fun doing this and like taking open questions and stuff. But I wanted to figure out where I could jigsaw it into the schedule. I'm still figuring that out. And I'll get a set specific start time, like it'll be, Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 a.m. or whatever the time will be. I'll try and figure out what that'll be. Barney says, which wife? I've only had one. I've only been married once. I've been engaged. I forget now because it's been so long. Either 4 or 5 times I've been engaged, but I only actually got married once. So interesting stories there as well. Now, one of you, Simon Pratt had asked, whereabouts in Iceland are you? We're in the north half of Iceland, north of Akureyri. You'll usually see me tag my photos with Akureyri. I try not to do too much with my exact location just because we've had some weird things around, people like knocking on doors to come and meet us. I've got one of those weird kind of celebrities. I can't even imagine how real celebrities deal with that. That would be just absolutely bananas. But people who are like, hey, I was driving through this area and I just wanted to see if you were available. It's not the kind of thing you usually want to have as a surprise. Simon says, nice area, and fair enough. Yeah, and the whole, as long as you know Akureyri, that at least tells you roughly where in the country it is. I like a lot of Iceland. We're actually looking at buying a number 1 fans, number 2 fans. We're looking at buying a lot here and building a house, and we're trying to figure out where in Iceland we want it to be. So that's kind of fun. Simon says, my wife and I did a driving trip around the perimeter of Iceland. We've always wanted to get the whole way around the ring road, and we kept getting stopped by all kinds of problems. Like last year, it was COVID-19. This year, we're determined to do it because we have so many holes in our schedule. And we went and bought a Land Rover Defender just so that we could make sure we could get around and also do the Highlands and not run into any car problems throughout the whole entire time. Number 1 OnlyFans. Wave says, would you suggest the Sony ZV-1 is a good starter camera? I've never had it, so I couldn't tell you there. If you go to brentozar.com and you do a search for cameras, I have a whole blog and setup comparing different kinds of streaming cameras and the ones that I use so that you can get an idea there. So let's go over. So I'll take open questions. They don't have to be about SQL Server. If you want to ask me something about the teleworker process, visas, careers, whatever, you're welcome to do that. I'm not going to have any kind of specific rules today. And we'll go for like 45 minutes or so. We'll go to probably to I was going to say the top of the hour, maybe the bottom of the hour, and go. I mostly just wanted today to go see if anything would explode in my streaming setup, see how that works. Blame the news channel that made you famous. That was so funny. So the whole thing behind that, so it was on NBC News for one sentence. The NBC Nightly News in the U.S. ran a story last week this week about how Iceland's handling the coronavirus. Like 3 months ago, they emailed me. It was about 2 months ago. They emailed me to set that up. They've been working on this for 2 months. They had all this planning. They flew a film crew into Iceland, a camera person, a producer, the anchor or the reporter that you saw on the story. We planned out where we were going to meet. We had all this planning and all this going on. We get to the place. They do all this setup. The camera guys, the sound guys, they have to set up all kinds of things, shoot a bunch of stuff. And we were there for probably like an hour altogether. But it gave me new respect for how expensive it is to run a news show, because they probably had, I'm going to guess, $100,000 worth of expenses in this 90-second segment about Iceland. It was incredible how much money and work they put into it. Dimitri says, how do you like the Defender? I adore it. I love it. It rides wonderfully. It's like got a great suspension. It feels like a luxury car in terms of how smooth it rides, even though it's a big jacked up SUV. The electronics aren't that smart. The automatic high beams dip way too often. The automatic windshield wipers don't do a good job of wiping at the right times, like they wait either too long or they go a little bit in haywire. There's a lot of things where it feels like the electronics are still being worked out early in terms of their kinks, which makes me a little nervous for Land Rover reliability, but overall as a car, it's fantastic. So Renegade, if you want, go ahead and follow the instructions up here on how to post questions, and I'll go ahead and take the first question out of there. Let's see here. Let's show Sanyums. So Sanyum says, why is a percentage recommended for auto growth instead of a fixed value? It's not. I don't know where you read that, and of course, with the internet, there's all kinds of bad advice out there all over the place. But percentage is not recommended. The reason why you don't usually recommend that is imagine a 100 gig database where the file needs to grow by 10%. Well, if you don't have instant file initialization turned on, or if you're dealing with the log file, it can take a really long time for Windows to erase out a 10% growth in terms of that size. Your next follow-up question is going to be, so Brent, what should I set it at? I'm going to give you a number that it's going to be kind of weird how I give you a formula to calculate a number. Go create a database and grow it in progressively larger sizes, both the data and the log file, so you get a feeling for what I'm talking about here. Grow it in progressively larger sizes and see how big of a growth you can do in like 5 seconds. Because your goal is you want the growth to finish pretty quickly, like 5 seconds or less, because it's going to be a blocking operation while it goes through and grows a log file, for example. You want it to finish within 5 seconds, but you don't want this growth thing to happen very often. You want to grow as big as you can in terms of that 5 seconds and then walk away. I don't want a whole bunch of really tiny little growths happening inside there, which ends up sounding like your doctor is talking to you. Next up, Rob asks, do row-store and column-store indexes have different locking behavior for updates? So this is one of those things where in my Fundamentals of Columnstore class, I had to kind of scope how much I was going to teach inside the span of one day. And that is one that I don't hit inside my one-day Fundamentals class, because the behavior is so different across each of the versions of SQL Server. And I'm trying to remember the exact version where they integrated or changed the way that they handle snapshot isolation with column store indexes. And I always have to go back to books online to remember. Generally, in terms of inserts, updates, and deletes, it's the same blocking behavior, but you can get different performance behaviors between the two, and different isolation levels can work a little bit differently than you might expect. So in terms of just, are locks different? No. But the way that updates are handled behind the scenes, though, is catastrophically different. An update in a column store index is treated as a delete, then an insert. And the place that it's inserted into, the delta store, has totally different performance characteristics than the column store indexes do. I have a great time in my fundamentals of column store class geeking out on the way that those are handled. And I have about a 45-minute demo where I go into details about how updates work and why their performance is so catastrophic on column store indexes. Benjamin Salazar says this guy is a nerd. That would be correct. That would be very correct. To give you a rough idea there, when I was in high school, I was very disappointed when I was voted most likely to succeed in my class. I was very disappointed that I was voted most likely to succeed because I wanted to be voted best dressed. That also tells you where my priorities were in high school. I certainly was not best dressed. Looking back at the pictures, to give you a rough idea, I had frosted tips. I didn't dye, but I went to a hairstylist who would dye the tips of my hair blonde, kind of like a Guy Fieri kind of thing. I went to tanning salons. I had gold by the inch necklaces. I wore Cosby sweaters. I wore Ocean Pacific surfing gear. Whew, boy, those were some dark days. Next up, Lohith? Yeah, Lohith says, does Query Store help to identify high CPU queries efficiently? So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble for that. Because the word that you used was efficiently. Query Store isn't the most efficient way to identify high CPU queries. The plan cache is. I would go for the plan cache instead, and the tool that I would use to analyze that is SP Blitz Cache, because it's really easy, and I'll show you what I mean. All you have to do is you have to go install the open source first responder kit, and then you go sort order equals CPU. SP Blitz Cache sort order equals CPU. And it's going to give you your top 10 most resource intensive queries without having to install anything ahead of time, without having to enable any features, without adding any performance overhead on SQL Server. So just to be clear, I'm saying this because you asked efficiently. It doesn't get a lot more efficient than that. This works on all currently supported versions of SQL Server, unlike Query Store as well there. So not that I'm against Query Store, but you did ask efficiently, so that's where that answer comes from. Red Beret says, we need pictures. I've been meaning to go back through and scan stuff. Now, it's impossible because I'm out in Europe, but I've been meaning to go back through and scan some stuff out of high school because y'all would get a whole lot of laughs out of that. And Space says, I want to see your picture from your high school yearbook. I have some old pictures online, but not a whole lot. My high school yearbooks were totally Cosby sweaters. I think everything was Cosby sweaters for my senior year pictures, but I have a lot of other pictures that are wonderfully horrifying, and I have no shame. It's impossible to embarrass me, so that makes for a lot of fun. Ralph says, what's the optimal value for a crystal disk mark that you recommend as fast as your budget can allow? But obviously, if you have, multi-million-dollar budget, you want much higher numbers than someone who only has, say, a $5,000 budget or a $5,000 a month budget in terms of storage. So it's kind of like saying, what's the optimal value on a car speedometer? Like, how fast should my car be able to go? Most people probably don't need to go faster than 65, 70 miles an hour or 120 kilometers an hour. But when you do need, if you're going to be in a real high-performance game and you want to try to win races, that's where there's no one number that you need to get to. It's as fast as you can possibly go. That's where performance tuning work starts to come into play as well there. Next up, Bogdan says, if you were to start consulting on performance tuning again, how would you pick your customers? Oh, man, wouldn't it be awesome if you could just pick your customers? Wouldn't it be awesome as if it was like the grocery store where you would take a cart and you'd walk down the aisle and you go, I would like this customer, please, and I'll take this customer. If you start performance tuning, or if you start any kind of consulting, it's not picking your customers. It's how do you get your customers to pick you? Instead of thinking of yourself as walking through the grocery store and picking customers off the shelf, think of yourself as a box up on the shelf. You're the one offering the service, and you're yelling to customers who are walking by, hey, buddy, come take my cereal box out and put it in your cart. If you're going to rely on yelling and waving in order to get the customer, it's going to be really expensive because that is exactly what everyone else is doing. Think about the customer walking down the cereal aisle. They are being bombarded by bright, colorful packages. The equivalent in the consulting business is go do a search for SQL Server Consulting and look at the number of pages and pages. And if you've got an ad blocker, turn it off. Not permanently, but just to see what the results look like. Because you'll see ad after ad. Hey, buddy, come hire me. I hardly, make any mistakes at all. You'll see all kinds of yelling and screaming. it's hard to compete in that market. So there are two ways that you can do it, two good ways that you can do it. One is to think of everyone you've ever worked with in the past as your future customers. If you can convince the people that you used to work with that they should hire you for performance tuning consulting, then word of mouth will continuously grow. If you can't convince people that you used to work with that they should hire you for performance tuning, that's also a lesson to learn too. That tells you something that maybe you're going to have a hard time with this. The other way that you can do it is you can go pour your heart into blogging and streaming, giving things away for free out to the public, doing open source work. This is what I pour myself into doing. It takes a long time to get there. This year we're marking the 20th anniversary of BrentOzar.com. I got a blog post going out about that tomorrow. The 20th anniversary of BrentOzar.com. It takes a really long time to get the market awareness out there to the point where people are directly calling you. But those are a couple of good ways that you can help get started. Let's see. Next up. Henrique says, do you have any recommendations against using snapshot transactions? We have a scenario where a lot of transactions may be rollback and snapshot transactions. So my bigger thing is, if you're going to have a problem with rollbacks, it doesn't really matter what your isolation level is. If you're going to be doing a lot of rollbacks, the isolation level isn't really going to help you. The big problem with rollbacks is undoing all of that work. SQL Server 2019 has an option that'll help accelerated database recovery, where SQL Server stores copies of rows in the database itself. So that way, when it's time to undo, SQL Server doesn't have to walk back through the transaction log, reading what you did, and then applying the changes over to the user database file. If your only goal is to make rollbacks faster, go look at 2019's accelerated database recovery. The other part of your question was, do you have any recommendations against using snapshot transactions? I assume that you mean snapshot isolation level, and that I don't have any recommendations against. That's totally fine. It's okay. It can run into performance problems because it stresses TempDB harder than it did before. So just watch your TempDB performance. I talk about that in my class, Fundamentals of TempDB. I talk about how to measure it and how to see whether or not your database is a good fit and how to measure the overhead after you turn that on. Next up, Jogchum says, hi Brent, can you recommend a good Columnstore index maintenance solution like Ola Hollengren's is for regular indexes? Man, I wish I could. Nico Neugebauer has something called the Columnstore Index Script Library. Let me show it to you. Let's see here. We'll switch over to here. So if I fire open a web browser and I search for Nico, well, now why on earth would it put that chat way on earth over there? Let me go move that chat message over so that it doesn't hit over there again. There we go. So if I say, actually, I don't even need to do that. Columnstore Index Script Library. So if you search for Columnstore Index Script Library, there's this brilliant, helpful, nice gentleman by the name of Nico Neugebauer, easy for me to say, out of, I always want to say Portland, but he's out of Portugal. Not even sure that he's still in Portugal. He moved a little while ago. But he has a Columnstore index maintenance library there. You can go download it for free. See, here's the thing, though. It hasn't been updated much in years. It doesn't currently work on SQL Server 2019. If I go look over at the commits, there have not been a whole lot of commits in the last couple of years. Now, Nico was busy. He wasn't able to keep this thing up to date, but this is why I have a tough time saying, go use this. This is all you need. It's the closest thing that we have to a good script library. It's just not all the way there yet. All right, let's come back over here and switch over here. I see a few of you have asked questions over in the YouTube or Facebook. Check out this thing right up here. It tells you where that we're getting the questions from, because I'm just working through that list, taking the most highly voted questions from there. Oh, geez. Tina says, what's your best SQL joke? So there's one that everybody's heard, and it's two table, or a query walks into a bar, sees two tables, and says, can I join you? And I'm just like, that's okay. But the one that I really like is, I would tell you an eventual consistency joke, but you might not get it for a while. There you go. And that's the best that I have. Santi says, how do I approach tuning a stored procedure which is having multiple queries with cursors and functions? Due to the cursor, the execution plan size is very high. That one's pretty easy. You just remove the cursor. That's really all there is to that. Are there ways that cursors can perform well? Not really. I mean, you can go through and tune the cursor so that it's doing as little work as possible, thinking in set-based instead of row by row. But I just don't hear a whole lot of overlap in between high-performance code and cursors. So the first place that I would just start is by ripping out the things that are cursors and functions and rewriting them as inline. You don't need to look at the execution plan to see that that's bad. You've already found the problem. All you have to do is go tackle that problem. All you have to do, right? That's real easy for someone to say that. Next up, Steve says, we've just upgraded a test server from 2014 to 2016. A few queries run endlessly, showing CX consumer weights that match the entire runtime of the query. Any ideas? Yeah, this is going to sound funny, but check your max stop numbers. Check max stop. You might have max stop set entirely too high. Just try backing it down a little bit. So for a classic example I've seen it at is where somebody has like a 96 core server and they forgot to set max stop, or they set it at a number that doesn't really match up well with what Microsoft is recommending. Now, after you've set that, and if you go Google for Brento's our max stop, I've got a whole post on how you do it. After you set that, you can absolutely still see unbalanced parallelism. It's a very hard problem to solve, and I tackle it in about 2 hours in my mastering query tuning classes and mastering server tuning classes. I wish there was an easy answer on that one, but it is notoriously hard. Next up, let's see here. NDC says, does SQL Server full text search still have the join problem? Yes. Any way to optimize it? No. Should I use another product? Yes. Don't you love those fast answers? So for what NDC is talking about here is that full text search will examine the entire contents of the table rather than often, not all the time, but often, rather than narrowing down what it should be looking at first through the other filters and predicates in the query. Like if I say, show me all the documents from yesterday that have the word database in them. SQL Server will go find all the documents from yesterday, but it will also, over in full text, go find all of the documents with the word database, which is going to suck and from a performance perspective, and then join the two together. So if every millisecond counts, if truly every millisecond counts, then that's why you end up shifting over to something more like Elasticsearch. I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard because then you have to keep those two things in sync. You have to keep Elasticsearch and contents in sync with SQL Server's search contents, and that's where the really hard stuff starts. A couple more folks have been asking questions over on YouTube. Make sure to read the little thing that's cleverly hidden there on the screen. So next up we have Kavishka says, hi Brent, I started my SQL Server blog. I'm only a year into the DBA life. Should I post links on my blog to LinkedIn after I publish a new blog post? I'm still a bit shy. Yeah, totally. You should. The people who care enough to follow you on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the people who care enough to follow you in those places, they want to see what you're writing. If they didn't like what you were doing, they wouldn't follow you. And they're free to unfollow you too, for that matter. you might feel guilty publishing that stuff across every social network that you have. You might feel like you're yelling too much. You're not. Because the thing is, most of us who use social networks, we don't use all of them. For example, I'm on Facebook, but it's only like once a week, maybe once a month that I actually go into Facebook and look what's going on. And when I go in there, I'm usually looking at my family and my past coworkers. I'm not really looking at everybody who's out there. So when I consume your stuff, it's likely going to be because I saw you on Twitter, for example. So that's why you want to spray your updates out everywhere, because people will follow you on different mediums. Next up, Gustav says, why is CDC broken on 2019 CU9? I have no idea. That's where you want to call Microsoft for support. And I know it's frustrating. It sucks pretty bad. When you call Microsoft for support, it costs about $500. It's different depending on what country you're in. $500, and it sucks to have to shell that out when you know that it's broken, but they will refund you that if it's actually a product problem. They just want to go through and do the work first to prove that it actually is. Often when you open a support call, they know that it's broken. They just haven't written it out to the public yet that it's broken. So you may get refunded right then and there. You can also post it in places like DBA.Stack Exchange. When you think it's a bug in the product, though, I wouldn't. I would immediately open up a call with Microsoft support, especially when you talk about something as crucial to the business as CDC. Greg, good. Oh, Greg, good to see you. So let's see. It's not bad. It's like 8 p.m. In Greg's time. Greg says we are using it on CDC on 2019. It works. Had to re-enable it or something. Make sure to specifically, and Greg's probably meaning CU20 or CU9 as well. All right, next up, let's see here. Greg says this is an awesome time. You should live in Iceland forever. So we're looking at buying a lot here and building a house. So we'll see how this goes. Really, honestly, a lot of it depends on how the European sale goes, how the sale goes with this month. We're doing the 75% off sale. If we hit a certain financial number, then we're going to spend like half the year here and half the year in either the US or Mexico. We still haven't quite figured that one out yet. Next up, we have Boris says, to understand the full impact of SQL, would it be enough to monitor these perfmon metrics? Not even close. And in fact, I'll tell you something. I don't even look at perfmon counters when I start troubleshooting a SQL Server. That's one of the last places I actually go and look these days. I did use it back in the early 2000s when that was the best option that we had available, but today you're much better off looking at weight stats. You can see a completely free video if you search for Brent Ozar, how to measure your SQL Server. It's Brent Ozar, how to measure your SQL Server. I've done webcasts with that for like Idera, Quest, all kinds of different companies, and you can go register with them and go watch it completely for free. You can also pay me to go watch my mastering server tuning class, but if it's something that focused, I'd rather get you a free answer. So there you go. Angel says, I heard a while ago for blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'll just let you go ahead and read this thing up here, the thing on how to ask a question, and we'll go for there. Tina has her joke. Tina says, I saw a great movie about databases today. I can't wait for the sequel. Except, you know what it is, Tina? It's actually, there's no sequel. Oh, so bad. Okay, let's see here. Next up, we have Rob says, how would you go about setting cost threshold for parallelism correctly? So when out of the box, cost threshold for parallelism is still 5. I would recommend 50. You'll hear other bloggers say anywhere in between like 40 and 100. I'm really fine with any of those numbers. Your next question will be, well, what's the exact right number? To find the exact right number, what you would have to do is you would have to look at your server's most resource-intensive queries and then run them with different maxstop hints to figure out, should this query be single-threaded or should it go parallel? Does it perform good enough single-threaded? If so, let's raise the cost threshold for parallelism higher than that query's cost. But in reality, you know what happens as soon as I start that engagement with clients? When we're looking at the queries and hinting them, I'm like, dude, why doesn't this query have an index? Dude, what are we doing here with this uppercase in the where clause? Dude, why are we... Because it's usually a guy who wrote the code. It does bad, right? That's terrible for me to say, but there we go. This is not true either. I mean, we all write bad code. But so when you start looking at queries that closely, that's what you end up looking at and trying to decipher anyway. So I'm like, just set cost threshold at a higher number. Anywhere between 40 and 100, I'm completely fine with. And then go tackle the more urgent tuning options. Next up, SQL Server Buddy says, hello, Brent. In SQL Server, I have an error 666, rename the new, dropping and creating. It's been a long time since I've seen the mark of the devil in an error message. I wish I remembered every error message by heart. I don't remember that one, even though you would think that I should, given that it's got the number 666 in it. But you're probably best off posting that one on something like dba.stackexchange.com. Make sure to include as much details as you can, because it's really tough for a stranger to know why what you did 6 months ago wasn't fixing the problem, because you're probably also remembering wrong. Next up, Albert says, when I run who is active or blitz who and there's an SSIS package, it displays the program name of SSIS package. How do I get the job name? I don't think you can, because any job can call different SSIS packages. The SSIS package is what gets kicked off and makes its own connection to the SQL Server. It's not like the job is connecting to the SQL Server at that point. So I don't know that I would be able to answer that one. Gabriel says, how's life in the island? I love it. It's fantastic. It is snowing out today, but that's actually unusual for us for the first time. Oh, I should show you I'll see the webcam going out the front of the house here. This is a little unusual. It's actually been really bright sun for the last week or so I've been very happy with that. Now today I'm actually not going to be able to do a hot tub day, which is kind of a little bit of a bummer. Next up, Sukhveer says, any suggestions from your experience when you join a new company? How would you go about your first few months building a good relationship with the team? Any do's or don'ts? Okay, yes. They hired you for your expertise and your opinions, but listen more than you talk. In the first few months, it's going to be, I've lost track of the number of people who have come in to a new environment and said, well, this way's dumb. Let me tell you about the way I did it at this one client. That's great, but we may have restrictions that you don't know about, or we might have tried that. You want to contribute information, but you want to make sure to listen more than you talk. And instead of saying, here's what to do, ask questions. And the questions shouldn't sound like, well, why the hell did you do it that way? Well, the way that I like to do it as a consultant is, oh, that's an interesting approach. Tell me more about, what determined our approach. Why is it that we decided to use temp tables for primary data storage? Or, oh, that's cool. I've never seen production SQL servers running on a laptop before. What drove that decision? And when they give you answers, ask more clear. Oh, did you ever think about using a real server? Or but don't come off as like, oh, this way is stupid. Like, learn from them. Because it's amazing how many people will have something to teach you, even when they look like an idiot. Gohan's question, why are there so few interesting courses on Postgres on Pluralsight? I'm not going to answer that. I have an answer for that. I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to get myself in trouble for that. Next up, let's see here. Vincenzo says, sorry, Brent, did I hear what you just said? Probably not, if you asked the question on it, right? Probably not. Sales to the EU. I remember you were not doing it because of GDPR. That's great news. Yes, the announcement will go out on the blog tomorrow. It's been emailed to my insiders, people who subscribe. That tells me you don't subscribe to my newsletter. There's only one of us who can fix that. That's you. Um, but if you subscribe to my newsletter, then you'll get heads up inside information on that kind of thing. So the official blog post will go out on that tomorrow. But yes, we're selling to the EU, EEA, United Kingdom, Taiwan, China. Anyone who wants to buy the courses is totally welcome to, which is cool. Both the recorded classes and the live classes as well. So absolutely fantastic. So next up, what monitoring tool do you recommend apart from native tools? You know, I don't have a specific tool recommendation. I am kind of okay with any tool that people want to use as long as they use a third-party tool. Don't try to reinvent the wheel and build it yourself, or else you'll quickly figure out that you're not going to be able to keep up with the massive amount of changes and new features that come out with SQL Server, new things that you have to monitor, things with always-on availability groups, memory, token, and perm cache, all kinds of crazy stuff. So I'm kind of totally okay with whichever one people want to use. I don't think that there's one that's amazing relative to the rest. Oh, this guy's a little hot on the audio there. I don't think that there's one that's like amazing relative to the rest. I think they all kind of suck equally. And for a while, one of them will outpace the rest. Then another one will outpace. It'll come and go through the course of your ownership of those. Ralphie, you can read the instructions right up there. Or then again, maybe you can't. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see, next up, Craig says, does Clippy know that you're cheating on him with a safety pin? So when there was a thing about like online harassment or something, or in-person harassment at conferences came out, and for a while we were supposed to wear safety pins to designate that we would be an advocate for whoever was running into harassment. You could come talk to us and we would defend you. And so that made me get the T-shirt, and I absolutely love the T-shirt. But so often people think it has to do with babies. They're like, "Are you a father? Do you need? Are you like a big fan of safety pins for diapers or something?" And I'm like, "Oh, this isn't working out the way I planned." But it looks really cool. I like the way it looks, at least. Let's see, and then we'll do one more. We'll do one last one before we call it quits today. Rao says, what should the approach be to convince a really stubborn and mission-critical trading app customer to do index tuning? I just use this as a carrot and the stick approach, because I run into this a lot in my own career where I think I know a solution to a problem and people won't do it. When they come to me and say, hey, can you make this faster? I'll go, yep. Here's what I would do based on these index tuning recommendations. Here are the changes that I recommend. If they go, well, we don't want to do that, I'll go, okay, so what do you want to do? Well, I don't really know. I hoped you would figure it out. Oh, I did. I gave it to you. Whenever you're ready to move forward with that, we can do it. I'll go, oh, curses. And then they'll go away into their little cave. And then they'll come back a while later with their manager. And they'll say the same thing, and then I'll repeat the same thing. It's a carrot and the stick kind of approach. I can't make someone do index tuning, but if they come to me and they go, here you go, we have this problem and we need you to fix it, here's how I would fix it. Oh, if you don't want to do that and you want to do something else, you could go do something else. But this is what I would do, and you hired me for my expertise, right? Not my ignorance. So kind of fun. All right, so there is a rundown. That actually worked out pretty well. I was happy with our first streaming here from Iceland. The sun has come up, although I can't freaking see it because of all of the snow coming down here today. This kind of blows because I had, like, when we first arrived at this house out in Iceland, we had 6, 7, 8 feet of snow. That's like 2 meters, I think, ballpark. 6, 7, 8 feet worth of snow, and I shoveled my rear end off in order to get the hot tub exposed. And so things were great for like a month. I didn't have to do any shoveling. Now, today I'm going to have to go out and actually shovel snow if I want to go use the hot tub tomorrow. So I'm not wild about that particular development. But we'll see. I mean, this is the kind of the good and the bad that you take with being out in Iceland. It's so gorgeous. It's utterly beautiful to go look at the mountains and just have a good old time. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see y'all in the next live stream. Adios, everybody.